Mao Zedong once claimed, "I am not afraid of nuclear war," but the reason he gave is almost unbelievable. And that's just one of 12 facts that reveal a version of Mao most people have never heard. A man who talked about global annihilation with the casual tone most of us use when ordering takeout. A man full of contradictions so sharp they feel like plot twists. And before we dive in, one quick anchor. Nothing here excuses the very real human cost of Mao's rule. Understanding is not glorifying. Alright, no fluff, let's jump straight into the first jaw dropper, which only gets stranger from here. Number 1. The nuclear war wouldn't be so bad statement. Here's a bold claim to kick this off. Mao Zedong once treated the idea of half the world dying like it was a rounding error. Yes, really. So picking up from that opening shockwave, let's zoom into 1957, when Mao sat across from Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev and calmly said something that still makes historians do a double take. Even if half of humanity died in a nuclear war, the other half would remain, and imperialism would be destroyed, and the whole world would become socialist. Half of humanity, gone. And Mao talks about it like he's rearranging furniture. It's the kind of statement that feels ripped from a dystopian villain monologue. Except this was an actual geopolitical leader with actual power over hundreds of millions of lives. The detachment is wild. A man who spent hours reading classical poetry, imagery, metaphors, delicate language, speaking about nuclear extinction with the emotional weight of a weather report. It shows this pattern he had, thinking on a massive historical scale while treating human suffering like a variable in an equation, which is unsettling. And somehow this mindset makes the next fact even stranger. Number 2. Mao avoided bathing but loved swimming in dirty water. Let's kick this one off with a contrast so sharp it might give you whiplash. Mao avoided regular bathing, yet happily swam in some of the dirtiest water in China. Yes, the same man who talked about purifying society couldn't be persuaded to purify himself. Reports from his personal physician describe Mao insisting that showers and baths were unnecessary, preferring something he called dry bathing, which is basically wiping yourself down with a towel and calling it a day. Imagine leading a country of 700 million people while smelling like you've been camping since 1949. Rough. But here's where it gets wild. In 1966, right as the Cultural Revolution kicked off, Mao staged a massive propaganda swim in the Yangtze River, a river so polluted officials had to clear debris before he jumped in. Newspapers claimed he swam over 9 miles. He didn't. Crowds cheered, and the whole spectacle was used as proof of his vitality. Private eccentricity. Public theater. A guy refusing to wash, yet performing aquatic heroism in a river that probably violated every health code known to mankind. But Mao's contradictions didn't stop at hygiene, and the next one cuts even deeper into his relationship with culture itself. Number 3. The Cultural Revolution versus Mao's personal poetry collection. Here's a teaser for you. Imagine launching one of the most aggressive cultural purges in modern history, while secretly curating your own private museum of the very traditions you told everyone else to destroy. Yeah, Mao did that. Picking up from the hygiene contradictions, this one digs into his relationship with culture itself. During the Cultural Revolution, 1966 to 76, Red Guards stormed libraries, smashed heirlooms, burned scrolls, and tore apart temples. Mao encouraged the destruction of the 4 olds: old ideas, customs, culture, habits, basically anything with a pulse older than 20 years. But privately, totally different story. Mao kept tens of thousands of books untouched in his personal quarters. Classical works, ancient commentaries, and most ironically, traditional poetry. He not only read it, he wrote it in regulated millennia-old poetic forms. The same stuff he publicly called poisonous. It's hypocrisy with a calligraphy brush. A man demanding permanent revolution while quietly clutching the past like a comfort blanket. And to be clear, the public destruction was real. Millions suffered, heritage vanished. Mao's personal stash survived because, well, he was Mao. And speaking of destruction versus preservation, wait until you hear what happened when he tried to reinvent China's economy from the backyard up. Number 4. The backyard furnace disaster. Let's try a direct address this time. If you thought destroying cultural artifacts was chaotic, wait until you hear what Mao did to China's cookware. Seriously, you're not ready for this one. So picking up from that whole preserve for me, burn for you contradiction, Mao rolled into 1958 with an idea that sounded bold on paper and absolutely deranged in practice: the backyard furnace movement. His goal? Boost steel production so China could leapfrog into industrial greatness overnight. His method? Tell every village, every commune, every household to melt down their metal. Pots, pans, farming tools, door hinges. If it wasn't nailed down, or even if it was nailed down, into the furnace it went. And the result? Millions of tons of absolutely useless pig iron. Brittle, lumpy, unworkable. Entire villages destroyed the tools they needed to survive just to produce metal blobs that couldn't build a single bicycle, let alone a factory. Officials, terrified of disappointing Mao, even crafted little steel gardens made from scrap to pretend the plan was working. Yes, steel gardens. And beneath the absurdity sat something darker. This was part of the Great Leap Forward, a period that led to famine and mass suffering. No jokes there. Mao's relationship with reality was often negotiable. And that makes his next personal habit even more unbelievable. Number 5. Mao slept all day and worked all night. Let's start with a universal experience. You know that completely unhinged sleep schedule you had in college? The one where you woke up at noon, ate breakfast at 5 p.m., and suddenly felt productive at 2 a.m.? Now imagine running the world's most populous country like that, because Mao basically did. Continuing from that whole reality is optional theme, Mao operated on a sleep cycle that would make a vampire say, "Dude, chill." He often woke up around noon, maybe 1 p.m. if he felt extra luxurious. His meetings? Midnight to 4 a.m. His staff? Forced to adapt, stumbling around like exhausted background characters in a zombie movie. Entire government departments became nocturnal because one man couldn't deal with mornings. The irony is thick. Mao preached tireless revolutionary discipline, yet lived like a student who discovered caffeine and philosophical arguments at 3 a.m. His aides wrote about needing naps in broom closets just to survive his schedule. One even said, working for the chairman was like living in permanent jet lag. And this wasn't just sleep chaos, it shaped everything around him. His rhythms became the nation's rhythms. And those rhythms, they influenced far more than work. They fed directly into the next very strange contradiction, the cult of personality he pretended not to want. Number 6, the cult of personality he pretended not to want. Here comes a callback, because remember that upside down midnight to 4 a.m. work schedule? Well, somehow Mao found the time to build one of the biggest cults of personality in modern history, while insisting, of course, that he absolutely did not want one. Sure. And I don't want extra fries. So here's the setup. Publicly, Mao told officials not to praise him too much. Modesty, humility, all that wholesome monk-like imagery. But privately? He let Lin Biao, his top lieutenant, unleash an entire worship industry. The Little Red Book, officially called Quotations from Chairman Mao, was printed in over 1 billion copies, waved at rallies, memorized by students, and basically used like a moral passport. Gigantic portraits of Mao were hung in factories, schools, living rooms. People literally bowed to them. His face became unavoidable, like a state-mandated screensaver. And Mao played the classic authoritarian game. Who, me? Encourage this? Never. Unless it helps me keep power, in which case, fine. It was plausible deniability on a national scale, a leader pretending to resist worship while benefiting from every ounce of it. And that cult didn't just shape politics, it shaped his romantic life too, which brings us straight to his most turbulent relationship ever. Number 7, Mao's turbulent marriage to Jiang Qing. Let's raise the stakes here, because if you thought a 1 billion copy cult of personality was dramatic, wait until you meet the woman who became Mao's 4th wife. Jiang Qing wasn't just a spouse, she was a political accelerant, the kind of person who could turn a mild breeze into a Category 5 storm with one speech. So, continuing from that state-sponsored worship machine, Mao's personal life took a sharp theatrical turn when he married Jiang Qing, a former Shanghai actress known for intensity, ambition, and a reputation that made senior party leaders nervous. Very nervous. Their marriage in 1938 mixed romance, strategy, and deep mutual suspicion. Imagine a relationship where every argument has ideological footnotes. Shakespeare would have looked at them and said, okay, that's too much. Publicly, she was downplayed, kept out of sight, framed as a loyal helper. Privately, she studied Mao's moods like a battlefield map. By the mid-1960s, she became a central figure in the Cultural Revolution, pushing radical cultural policies with the same energy she once brought to stage roles. And the irony? Mao denounced bourgeois drama while married to an actress. Delicious contradiction. But behind closed doors, Mao's relationships got even more complicated. Much more than one marriage could contain. Number 8. His network of young companions. Here's a question to pull you right in. What happens when a leader preaches revolutionary purity by day, but his private life looks nothing like the posters? Picking up from his turbulent marriage with Jiang Qing, we head into the part of Mao's life the government never acknowledged publicly. According to multiple former staff members, including his physician Dr. Li Zhishui, Mao maintained a quiet network of young women drawn from dance troupes, arts groups, and sometimes even revolutionary performance teams. These weren't official relationships, they weren't publicly recorded, they were simply there. A hidden world operating in the shadows of the man who condemned bourgeois decadence. Ethical pause, because this stuff is messy. No lurid details, no prurience, just the core contradiction. Mao's inner circle facilitated these encounters, and questioning them wasn't really an option. Power doesn't invite debate, it dictates. And the irony practically screams. A leader demanding ideological purity while living in a private sphere completely insulated from the rules everyone else had to obey. It's another crack in the public image of ascetic simplicity. Meanwhile, the public cult presented him as almost saint-like, which makes the next moment, involving mangoes of all things, even stranger. Number 9. The Mango Cult. Let's hit you with a contrast so bizarre it almost feels like satire. In a decade defined by political chaos, violence, and ideological paranoia, people started worshipping fruit. Literal fruit. Welcome to the Mango Cult. Rolling forward from Mao's hidden private life, we land in 1968, when Pakistani officials gifted Mao a simple crate of mangoes. Nice gesture, right? Except Mao didn't even like mangoes. He sent them to a group of factory workers as a symbolic thank you, and that's where reality packed its bags and left the country. Workers who had never even seen a mango before treated the fruit as a holy relic. One was preserved in formaldehyde. Another was paraded in a glass casket like a saint's toe bone. Factories created wax mango replicas, complete with velvet-lined display stands. One factory leader even told workers to study the mango's revolutionary spirit, whatever that means. Scarcity turned symbolism into magic. And during the Cultural Revolution, symbolism was everything. A single exotic fruit became a morale tool, a loyalty test, and, let's be honest, a national inside joke no one dared laugh at. And if this is what mangoes could trigger, wait until you see what Mao tried with the US Navy. Number 10. Attempting to provoke the US Navy. Let's open with a bold claim. Mao once tried to poke the US Navy. Yes, that US Navy, just to score propaganda points at home. Because apparently, when domestic politics got tense, Mao's solution was, let's annoy a superpower. Building on the surreal mango worship frenzy, the scene now shifts to the 1950s Taiwan Strait crises, where Mao believed that a controlled, limited clash with the United States could strengthen China's revolutionary image. Limited. As in, let's fire some shells, watch the Americans respond just a little, and spin it as proof that imperialists fear us. Incredible logic. Terrifying logic. According to diplomatic archives, Mao told top officials that occasional confrontations would educate the masses and bolster national unity. Meanwhile, back-channel communications quietly reassured Washington that China didn't actually want full-scale war. So publicly, fiery anti-US speeches. Privately, please don't overreact, we're just performing. It was geopolitical chicken wrapped in theater. The kind of double game that makes historians rub their temples and whisper, why? Ethical note here, these brinkmanship games put millions of lives at theoretical risk, all for political optics. And those optics get even stranger when you look at how Mao romanticized peasant life while avoiding it almost entirely. Number 11. Loving peasant life but never living it. Here comes a universal experience. We all have that one friend who romanticizes simple living while ordering $9 artisan coffee and refusing to go camping. Mao was that friend, except he controlled the country of 700 million people. Flowing from his geopolitical theatrics, Mao constantly praised the nobility of peasants, the soil, the struggle, the purity. He wrote poems about rustic heroism, described rural hardship with this misty, nostalgic glow, and framed peasants as the moral backbone of the revolution. But after the 1940s? Mao didn't live anything close to peasant life, not even remotely. He moved into heavily guarded compounds, Zhongnanhai in Beijing being the most famous, complete with curated menus, private doctors, filtered water, temperature-controlled rooms, and staff who handled every detail of his day. His exposure to the countryside often meant driving through it in a convoy, or reading reports someone else sanitized. It's revolutionary aesthetics without the revolutionary lifestyle. A leader praising mud-soaked labor while living in a bubble where mud was something he encountered only in poetry. And that brings us to the final, most revealing contradiction of all one, that circles back to everything we've seen so far. Number 12, Mao's private library versus public book burning. Let's kick this finale off with stakes escalation, because this contradiction isn't just odd or ironic, it's the one that ties every other Mao paradox into one enormous, uncomfortable knot. If you want to understand the man behind the movements, this is the fact. Continuing from his romanticized but not lived love of peasant life, here's the ultimate split-screen moment. While Mao encouraged Red Guards to destroy old culture, torch libraries, and trash centuries of scholarship, he quietly maintained a private library of tens of thousands of books. Not decorative books, not props, books he actually read. Books filled with his handwritten notes, margin scribbles, arguments with dead authors, little bursts of intellectual ego. This is the same era when countless public collections were annihilated. Students dragged classics into courtyards and burned them in bonfires the size of small buildings. Meanwhile, behind guarded doors, Mao consumed history, philosophy, military theory, everything he denied the public. A man who built power by limiting information, privately relied on information to keep that power sharp. Irony doesn't get heavier. And of course, complexity doesn't erase consequences. The contradictions didn't cancel the damage, they amplified it. Which brings us full circle to the beginning. Ready for the conclusion? We open this whole journey with Mao's jaw-dropping line about nuclear war, a statement so casually apocalyptic it felt like a movie villain ad-libbing. And now, after walking through 12 contradictions big enough to reshape a country, that quote makes even more sense. Mao thought on a scale so massive it erased individuals, yet his life was also built out of tiny, private contradictions. The poems he hid, the books he kept, the habits he denied, the comforts he protected while preaching struggle to everyone else. He wasn't a myth. He wasn't a cartoon villain. He was a human being wielding a level of power most humans should probably never have. And the consequences of that power, sometimes absurd, sometimes catastrophic, still echo through China today. If you want to deep dive into what happened after Mao, how his legacy shaped modern politics, economics, and the world we live in now, tell me in the comments which part of this story you want explored next.